Today, we're really digging into something quite concerning, the economic headwinds hitting local communities.
That's right. We've got a range of sources, reports, surveys, expert opinions.
And they all seem to point towards, well, closures, shrinking demand, serious financial stress, particularly in regional areas.
Yeah. The mission today is sort of pinpointing the main drivers behind this downturn.
And looking at what could possibly be done, right? Potential solutions.
Exactly. And it's maybe surprising just how widespread this is. Even major familiar brands are feeling the pinch.
Really hits home, doesn't it? So where do we start? The closures.
I think so. The sources consistently highlight a really significant drop in consumer spending. We're talking over the last couple of years, mainly in these regional spots.
And it's not just the little guys, the mom and pop shops?
No, not at all. Big global retailers, the ones you see everywhere, are actually shutting down stores in smaller cities.
Wow. The examples you mentioned earlier were quite striking, like that major southern city.
Mm-hmm. Popular food and beverage chains. You know, the kind you usually see as a sign of, like, commercial health.
Yeah, familiar names.
Many have just vanished.
Huh.
Left empty storefronts for rent signs up. It's quite visible.
And even during busy times, like lunch hour.
Restaurants are apparently eerily quiet. It's a stark difference from how things used to be.
So what's driving that specific change, the consumer behavior shift in those areas?
Well, it seems like a few things are feeding into it. E-commerce is almost certainly a big factor for brick-and-mortar places, especially outside the big metros.
Right, online shopping's reach.
And then there are demographic shifts, too. You know, younger people often migrating towards larger cities for jobs and opportunities.
That makes sense. Less local spending power, perhaps? And this isn't just hitting shops and restaurants, is it? Local industries are struggling, too.
Precisely. We have a source, a home appliance parts maker, reporting a pretty hefty drop in sales.
How much?
Around 20% in the last year. And they directly link it to their clients moving production overseas.
Ah, chasing lower labor costs.
Lower labor costs, yeah, and navigating those ongoing international trade dynamics.
And there are other examples.
Yes, similar stories from auto parts manufacturers in some coastal cities. They're facing intense global competition, higher tariffs.
Making it hard to stay afloat.
Yeah, raising serious questions about whether they can sustain operations long term.
Okay, so it's definitely broader than just a few isolated incidents. What about business confidence generally? The surveys you mentioned.
Right. Recent surveys show a pretty clear dip in business sentiment. That's across key indicators compared to, say, 2 years back.
What kind of indicators?
Things like reported business conditions, production levels, sales figures, even forecasts for domestic demand. They're all down.
And is this across the board or worse in some areas?
It's noticeable everywhere to some extent, but a decline is definitely more pronounced in non-metropolitan regions.
So smaller communities are really feeling the brunt of it.
They are. And some sectors seem particularly vulnerable.
Like which ones?
Well, some regions are seeing really sharp falls in consumer spending and production outlooks. Construction materials, for example. Sources say they're facing an almost complete halt in new project orders.
Wow, a complete halt. That's drastic.
It is. And we're hearing directly from business owners. Many describe current conditions as, well, some of the worst they've ever experienced.
Just trying to survive.
Pretty much. Many are just barely hanging on, often by cutting labor costs significantly.
Which, of course, has its own knock-on effects. This all sounds like it leads to serious financial strain.
It absolutely does. We're seeing data showing a sharp rise in loan delinquency rates among these regional companies.
So businesses are struggling to pay back loans.
Correct. And that makes banks nervous, naturally.
So banks tighten credit.
Exactly. They tighten lending practices to manage that rising risk. But that creates a kind of vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Yeah, businesses need cash flow, but financing gets harder to find.
Precisely. And banking sector insiders basically confirm this, acknowledging that declining credit ratings are forcing them to be more cautious lenders. It's unavoidable from their perspective.
Okay, so faced with this pretty grim picture, what are the experts suggesting? What are the potential ways out?
Well, industry associations are sounding the alarm quite loudly. Some are warning of a potential collapse in these regions without government help.
What kind of help are they asking for?
They're calling for immediate emergency financial support and tax relief measures.
Short-term fixes.
Short-term urgent relief, yes. There are also recommendations floating around to ease counterfeit regulations. The idea is to improve business liquidity.
Make it easier for banks to lend, perhaps?
Potentially, yeah, like lowering reserve requirements and also pushing for restructuring things like reducing excess capacity, maybe encouraging mergers and acquisitions to consolidate struggling sectors, make them stronger together.
Right. What about longer-term thinking, beyond immediate aid?
There's that angle, too. One economics professor we looked at emphasizes fostering new industries.
Tailored to the regions.
Exactly. Industries that play to regional strengths, maybe advanced mobility, sustainable tourism, specialized finance, but with government backing.
How so?
Things like rent subsidies, maybe targeted corporate tax incentives to attract those new businesses.
But is everyone on board with just giving out support?
No. There's definitely a counter-argument. Another academic source offers a strong caution against sort of indiscriminately propping up failing companies.
Why is that?
The concern is that it could undermine the financial system in the long run. They argue for a much more selective approach.
Conditional support.
Yes, conditional support, only for companies that show a clear, viable path to recovery, not just throwing money at businesses inevitably going under.
Okay, let's try and pull this together. Local economies are clearly grappling with some major challenges. We've got falling demand, these bigger global economic shifts, and mounting financial pressure.
A tough mix.
And the solutions on the table range quite a bit, from immediate cash injections and tax breaks
to more strategic, long-term investments in completely new sectors for these regions.
with this key debate running through it all. How much support should be given, and should it have strings attached?
Exactly. It's a really complex situation. It demands a very careful balancing act, between that urgent short-term relief and building sustainable long-term growth.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with a really crucial question to think about. Considering these different expert takes on intervention, broad support versus that more targeted conditional approach, what do you think the long-term consequences might be for each path? How do these different strategies potentially shape the future of these struggling local economies?
Something to mull over. Thanks for this deep dive.